Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for the AU Eagle Family webinar series. We're so excited to bring some amazing content and one of our amazing staff, administrators here, and leaders here at AU to you, to your living room or wherever you may be. My name is Samantha Caruth. I'm the Associate Director for Family Engagement on the New Student Family Programs team. And I'm so excited to um, host a little bit this evening. But really, more importantly, you're here to speak with Dean Trogden, and I'd love to introduce Dr. Bridget Trogden, who's our Dean of Undergraduate Education and Academic Student Services. And with that, I'll kick off to you.
Great. So we are off and rolling. Whoever has it on your bingo card, but Samantha, they can see my screen. We're good. Okay. All right. So it's good to see you all. And if you're watching this later too, that's fine. Or you might be busy and just listening in the car, that's fine too. So this webinar is kind of a continued series, so it's got the word continued in it. So your students' continued academic success in the fall semester. So big picture, who am I and why are we doing this? Okay. So my role here is Dean of Undergraduate Education and Academic Student Services. So I have my happy little hands in a lot of the pots for your students' academic success. So lots of different components of undergraduate education that includes our curriculum, our policies, our living learning communities, a lot of the different things that we do. And also all of our academic student support. So that includes our disability supports, all of our tutoring centers, our writing center, our academic coaching, work a lot with the advisors that are in the colleges and the schools, and lots of different things. So if I haven't seen you before, it's good to virtually meet you, and I hope to be able to meet you in person too. So the other part of my title is professor, and I don't take that lightly because I've been a professor. This is year 21 for me. My doctorate is in chemistry, and I've taught pretty much everything in the chemistry curriculum. I've taught first year writing, I've taught honors students, I've taught service learning, I've done study abroad with students. I've taught lots of general education courses. I'm actually teaching a course this term, a 1 credit hour, one of our Encounter AU courses, which is going great. I love those students. They are fantastic to get to interact with every time we have class. I have taught medical school, and I have taught STEM PhD students how to be professors. And I'm also an active researcher. I have a book chapter that came out 2 weeks ago, literally about student success at research universities. So like we practice what we preach here. And I'm a little bit of a nerd when it comes to learning and all of those things. But the third component, and I don't have this on there, is I am mom to a college student. I have my one and only son, my one and only baby is a first year college student this year. Had to get away from us, so he's not at AU, which makes me a little sad, but doing well. And so whenever I'm talking to any parents and families and supporters about how to support our students, I am also in that boat with you, my friends, and thinking through what are the kinds of conversations that we can have and the ways that we can, kind of be the guide on the side now with our college students. So I did some earlier webinars this year. So this is kind of the third part. I did one in July that was helping your students start and stay strong academically, and really went into a lot there about what learning is and how learning works. And I know that that webinar is up and available if anybody wants to watch it. During August during move-in, did just kind of a short overview, but it was just supporting students' academic success and went over some big things. I know that was a lot for a lot of people as they were moving their children their family into college that day. And today, wanted to be able to talk about your students' continued academic success in the fall semester. And that's because we are at approaching midterm, and so there's some things to think about as the semester is moving along. So I also have what I'm going to go through is available on the web, and there's a case sensitive link. Samantha is also, making sure everybody has it, but it has a bit.ly just to make it easier. And it's just Eagle Fall, capital E, capital F. So case sensitive, in case there's any links or anything that you want to look at or things that you want to refer back to. Okay, so that's a lot. But big picture, if we're just thinking about calendar, what is going on now? Um, our college students are experiencing a lot. We are currently in the sixth week of the term, but I wanted to, and thank you so much to Samantha and her office, really wanted to be able to get a chance to talk to you this week, because family weekend is this coming weekend. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, not everybody comes. That's okay. But it is coming up, so that's a great time to get to talk to your eagle about some of the things that we're going to go over. After that, that next weekend is fall break, so we don't have classes on Friday. So some students are going home or going to visit or wherever it is that they're going. Some are staying here. Any of those is fine. But those also, can be a really good opportunity for checking in with your student at AU. Um, we also have registration for spring courses that is going to start in October, typically the 23rd or after for undergrad students. They all have a little bit of a different registration date depending on some different factors going on, but the spring schedules actually came out today. So they can start looking at what the courses are for spring. They can start working with their advisors on having some meetings, getting the information that they need on the course offerings. That's also going to tie into some of the questions and things that it would be good for you to think about as you're working on supporting your Eagle. And then numbers wise, I have a calendar right in front of me at my desk all the time, and I have the week number on it because there's always specific times of the year that things kind of heat up and then cool back down. So we're in week 6. We have 15 weeks academic term, not including finals. And so we're approaching midterm. So again, all of those dates are really important. So it's a really good time to kind of make sure that you know what's going on as we're getting toward that midterm of the semester. Other thing is I will not be here this weekend. I know there are a lot of families that come in. I really hate missing family weekend. I'm actually on a board that works on undergraduate general education, and we have a meeting that I really can't miss. And so I hate not being here, but you get me today. And you can tell all your friends and they can watch this webinar later if they're not here. All right, so that's kind of big picture with calendar. The first thing is just to think about, right? So I've kind of laid this out, what's going on as we think about midterm. And this is a good time to just kind of check in with your Eagle as we approach this midterm point. And the big picture is anytime that you can, as you're talking to them, focus on their choices and their habits, not who they are. It's not, oh, you have to become a better student. No, you're a person. What are the choices that you're making? Those choices then lead to habits. And so those are really good questions to ask. I try to do open-ended questions, and I'll probably like many of you have a child that's very academically capable, but if I don't ask an open-ended question, it'll be yes, no, fine. And that doesn't always do my mama heart good. So depending on the relationship you have, the way that you have conversations, some things to think about talking about is just what are the positive choices that you're making. I had an opportunity to see my child in person a couple weeks ago, and we went on a walk because I knew he would talk to me while we were moving. If we were just sitting across from each other at the table or on the phone or watching TV, he's not going to talk to me. But while we were walking, he would. And we talked about this, and he was talking about the good food choices he feels like he's making. He was honest with me about when he goes to bed and gets up, which seemed fine. He's working out at the gym and learning some different ways of putting on muscle and things like that. And so, those are things to think about. So what are the positive choices you're making? And then how are you exhibiting these choices in everyday actions? So in academics or in other areas, and then you can always think about, what positive habits would you like to develop that can help you be successful? Calendaring is a big one. I have a new student here that I was just working with who has been struggling a little bit with meeting expectations because every day is different. It's not like, high school or other times where they have the same courses every day, although not a lot of high schools have the same courses every day now too, with block scheduling and things like that. But she was having issues with calendaring. And I said, here's some tips, but you really need to talk to an academic coach. I'll loop back to that in a minute, but our academic coaches are, AU employees. They are full-time. They have availability every day. No student ever pays anything extra to work with our academic support services. That is included in tuition, or prepaid, as I like to call it. And so I was working with this student on some calendaring tasks because she was just having a hard time kind of prioritizing. And she sent me an email today and said, here's what I did. And I'm like, hallelujah, and so it's starting to make a difference. So this is a positive habit. Another thing are, these things can pile up and they can feel overwhelming with it's all the stuff, all the things I need to do. I'm not in college in that way, and I feel it right now too, because the semester just really starts getting so busy right now. And this idea of what is the one choice you can start to do today to make a positive change or continue to succeed. And so big picture, just these questions are useful to you, please use them. They actually come out of research on student academic success, but take them, adapt them, whatever you need to do. But really focusing with students on the choices that they're making and the habits that they're building. So I've got two examples. And these actually do connect in with things like midterm exams. And depending on what our students are experiencing, they might have midterm exams, they might not. A lot of our students, especially in STEM classes, they'll have 3 or 4 tests, and they've already had their first big test. They'll have another one in a couple weeks. I actually coached some students through some organic chemistry a couple weeks ago because I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. And the tutor they were working with, her session ended and they still had some questions. And I said, I've got an hour, give me the marker. And it was fantastic. And I loved it. But, as our students are preparing for exams, these are some kind of things to think about. So this is just an example of applying those habits and choices. So with midterm, those dates do start to pile up. Sometimes they have multiple exams, papers, whatever it is that are due right around the same time. And it really helps to start with this idea. You've been studying all along. Every time that you prepare for class, you submit an assignment, that's studying. But then when possible, like a week before the exam, start to in one place make sense of the information. And I talked about this a lot this summer in July about kind of how learning works. But make sense of the information, list the topics to be covered, and then do as many as you can of the following. So make a study guide. So study the first topic. Next day, study the second topic, review the first. Day 3, study the third topic, review the first and second. So this is kind of a distributed practice. And then you repeat until you covered everything. Make a large review chart. I love seeing students with these giant rolling whiteboards that we've got several of them in the library. They're in a lot of different spaces. We have some spaces on campus where the walls are whiteboards. We have a place in our academic center in Butler 300 where they have these big whiteboards they can actually pull down and write on them and then put them back up. I mean, there are really cool ways that they can do these things where they're making these charts and they're filling them all in. They can make a practice exam. Sometimes faculty will give them old exams. They'll give them old quizzes. And if they don't have those, they can make their own and then wait a couple days and then take the exam, or this is a great place to work with a partner and, write an exam for somebody else and then have them take it. And actually, do the problems, answer the questions themselves, predict the exam questions and write out the answers, right? So those are some of the things whenever they're able to study ahead of time. Other option, what if they haven't been studying all along? Okay, oops, not ideal. Don't give up. Okay, there are always things that our students can do. So if they haven't been working ahead of time, they have an exam tomorrow kind of thing. Go over the main ideas on a review chart, make a map of the ideas in the class. That doesn't take that long. If there's not time to read a textbook or review main articles or things from class, look at headings, look at learning objectives, look at practice questions. And then this is the kicker, after the exam, review the preparation and then make changes to your choices for future exams. So it's not just, I'm going to study more. No. What can you start earlier? Can you better understand what is going to be on the exam. I talked about some things in July about metacognition. So thinking about your thinking and controlling your thinking. And these are things that our academic coaches love talking with our students about. Professors talk about this in office hours. Professors will often tell them exactly how to succeed in a class and exactly what to study. So just really paying attention to those things matters. All right, so I'm going to pause for a second and check. Do we have questions, things we need to cover right now? I think we're still good. I don't see anything. Samantha, we're good. All right.
Great, great.
Okay, full steam ahead. Okay, so some other things to consider, academic alerts and midterm grades. So by midterm, students should really know how they are doing. They can use the syllabus and they can look at the earned grades that they've gotten. A lot of our faculty do use Canvas and a Canvas grade book that will let the students know how many points they've received on things or check marks, what's still missing, what's late, those kinds of things. Um, so they should have gotten some graded work back by now. Students often, not always, but they often receive an academic alert if they have a subpar performance. So if they're kind of a low C or below, the faculty will submit a little report, and usually it just says why the student's not doing well and just a little snippet that goes to the student. And it goes to their academic advisor. The academic advisors often then reach out and follow up. But it's a great time for the students to talk to the professor. Okay, so if they get an academic alert, this is a good question for you as parents, family supporters. Have you gotten any academic alerts, and do you know what to do about it? The answer is talk to your professor, talk to your advisor if you can, and always talk to the professor. The reasons that students receive academic alerts is usually they're not going to class or they're not submitting their work. I've got data on this. I track this data. We work on doing as many improvements as we can, but it's usually that they're not submitting their work. So this is a great time to meet with the professor and make sure they understand expectations. If there's something else going on, communicate. Those are really important. So if they have no idea, they haven't gotten grades back, there's probably some information missing and they need to talk to the professor. This does not happen often, but last week was week 5 of the semester. I had a student show up who had never been there before. And there were some legitimate reasons that she had some miscommunication. I got her back on track. She still has to have some choices to spend her time in catching back up in the class, but I am working with her on that. So talk to the professor. I think you'll see now every one of these ends with talk to the professor. So if the grades are low, so C or lower at midterm, talk to the professor. Okay, so things that the students should be asking. And, is there a chance for me to pass? How much work still needs to be done? Depending on the class, sometimes late work can happen. Sometimes there's so much at the beginning of the class that's really foundational that they need to build on, like sometimes in language classes and some math classes, etc. If they're really not grasping the information by midterm, it's very, very difficult to succeed. In other classes, they can get caught up, and the professors are great to talk to about that. So ask if there are other opportunities to earn higher grades, especially on major assignments. It's a really great thing to talk to faculty about. And then also just how can I improve? Ask for specific suggestions for preparing and meeting expectations. I have talked to a lot of students in multiple classes where whenever they're writing papers, sometimes they're just not starting ahead of time, or they're so hesitant. This happens a lot. We have students that are so hesitant to turn something in that's not great. I've told them it's okay. Submit what you can. I'll give you feedback on it, and sometimes I'll say, okay, you need another draft on this, and let them have that opportunity. So that's a really good time to talk to the professors. They're all a little different because all classes are a little bit different, but the big key here is talk to the professor. Last piece of this is if there's not a chance of passing, numerically or in terms of the foundational skills, they need to determine if a withdrawal should be pursued. And that's a withdrawal, a W. It's not a drop. A drop is the same as unregistered. That is a different process, and we are past the deadlines for that. We're talking a withdrawal. So a W would show up on their transcript, which is not that big of a deal. Pretty much everybody has a W on their transcript from something. I know I have one and nobody has ever cared, right? And there's a legitimate reason for it. But the withdrawal deadline is the end of October. And so the end of October is week 10 of the semester. We're currently at week 6, so there's still time. This is a really good time, though, for students to talk to the academic advisor because depending on um, things like their visa status, their major, which course they're in, the financial aid, if they have to have a certain GPA, etc. There could be unintended consequences of a withdrawal, but usually it's not that big of a deal. And it's better to have a W than an F because an F, I mean, they both sit there, but the F impacts the cumulative GPA, a W does not. And so these are really important things for our students to know. Our academic advisors are key people for working with them on that. Okay, I don't see any questions. Uh, okay, so that's kind of midterm. Other things to think about, what's coming up after midterms. So there is nothing new under the sun when you've worked with college students for a really long time. After midterms, there's a little bit of a slump. So this is a great time for renewing their motivations. Why are you here? What are your goals? What is it that you're doing and why is it important to you? I mentioned a class that I'm teaching this term. It's her 1 credit hour Encounter AU course. The first assignment is why are you here? That was what they submitted in the second week of the semester. And I said they could focus on the why, they could focus on the you, they could focus on the here. It didn't matter. And little teaser, but in a couple weeks, I'm going to ask them to pull that back up again as they're thinking through that mid-semester slump. Think about what you wrote in the first or second week of the term about why you're here. What are your motivations? Where have you had past mistakes that have led to a second chance? Where are there things that you've done and are doing that you're very proud of? And that can be really helpful with those motivations. One of my favorite quotes, I think I've said this to parents several times, but Dr. J, so Julius Erving, basketball star, right, is that being a professional is doing the things you want to do at the times you don't want to do it. And that really works well with college students as well because they all want to be successful. They want to learn. They have these amazing aspirations and things that they want to do, but sometimes they want to sit down and watch Wednesday on Netflix or The Summer I Turned Pretty just ended. That was a big one in the dorms on Wednesday night, let me tell you. But they want to do that instead of studying, but do the things you want to do at the times you don't want to do them. So just really important things to think about. Another thing to think about is they're not always interested in every subject. So sometimes there's low interest in a subject. And these are our tips. These are good known tips for learning and learning science. Try to find something relevant in that course to your life or major. Even if it's a course you don't think you like, what is it in here that is relevant to me, to my goals? It's good to go back and then remind yourself of your overall motivations and goals. And I mentioned earlier that the spring schedule came out today. Students will start registering soon. This is a time that students start to think about changing their majors because sometimes there are some classes that they like and sometimes there are classes that they don't. That's okay. They still have time to explore. They can, if they're in classes this term and they hate every one of them and none of them wants to be their major, talk to the advisor, try some different things in the spring. So, these are all doable, but the low interest in the subject lets you know something. It's somehow not connecting, but it's much better to go ahead and complete a course with a good grade than it is to have to go back and repeat it because you just gave up and stopped going. Okay, so, and then of course, like the holistic pieces, evaluate how are they taking care of themselves, sleep, exercise, nutrition. The weather's about to start turning. Our new students this year are like what I see, and I've told you all before, my office is in housing, like the Anderson Let's Quad is right there. I've seen them run by, they're out there studying. Big group just came in after eating dinner. Our first year students are very happy right now. It's also been sunny and beautiful, and we're about to start having some weather turning, and sometimes when it's darker and eventually it's going to start getting dark about 5 p.m., they're not always taking such good care of themselves. And so, the sleep, the exercise, the nutrition matters. with the slump. The other thing is just settle in and do the work. You don't should not be doing academic work all day every day. That's not healthy, but just do the work and then develop plans for fun things, relaxing things as well. So that's something that's coming up. And after the midterm slump, we hit Thanksgiving break. So this is something to think about. Thanksgiving is wonderful. My family does not travel. My spouse and I are both academics. He teaches seventh grade, bless him. Um, and Thanksgiving is the one time in the fall we get that's just chill. And so rest, relax, reconnect, connect with people. But for college students, an extended break, so not doing anything academic, can actually be really harmful for learning. They come back from Thanksgiving break. We have 1 week of class and then finals. And so it's late this year. So that's something to think about. So, as much as they can, just encourage if they can before they come home or maybe the first day or something, just ask, have you made a study plan, for when you're going to do your academic work? And it really helps to write those plans down for accountability. They can go to a library or a coffee shop. That can be, really good way of studying where it's not just kind of getting in that relaxation rut. Um, do studying earlier in the break when possible. And then they're going to have a lot of major assignments or exams that are due in that last week of the semester. And, work for 20 minutes a day. It doesn't have to be all the time. They do need the break. They do need the relaxation. They do need that family time and connection time. And however your family and your support for your student participate in Thanksgiving is great, but they need to not ignore academics completely for 4 or 5 days. That can also be detrimental. Okay, so last thing that I'd kind of put together is just a glimpse into where we are right now. So I asked several people and I gave them some little emojis. I asked one of our professors, who's a professor in a first year course, so a common course that has a lot of new students. And they said that the students right now are very engaged in the class discussions. They want to listen, they want to focus on their peers when their peers are speaking, which is great. So that's good teamwork and the kinds of career skills we want our students to develop as well. They're doing in the classroom here. They're able and willing to engage in conversations. They want to be here, they want to learn, and they want to be off their phones, which is interesting. And I would say the same thing in the class that I'm teaching. They're not on their phones. They actually kind of want that break. And this professor also said they give me hope for the future, which I thought was really interesting. So this is just, one of the vignettes that we're seeing. I asked our undergrad associate deans and I asked our academic coaches what they were experiencing and what the tips are. And they actually aligned quite a bit. So I kind of grouped them together a little bit. And as much as possible, we need to empower our students to ask for help when they need it. That was one of the biggest things that I said to parents and families in August. And I said that in July. Encourage help-seeking behavior. It is not a weakness. They are not bothering us. We want to help. We want to help them upskill in order to meet their goals. So they don't have to figure things out on their own. And then communication is essential. And I would say with faculty and with staff and with peers in order to prioritize their commitments. And as much as it can be frustrating, like if they wanted to be part of a club, but they need to miss a rehearsal for AU in motion because they have a test the next day and they really need to spend that time on the test, that's okay. But make sure they actually spend the time studying. If they probably shouldn't skip class to practice for AU in motion. It doesn't always work that other way. But prioritizing different things and communicating what you need is fine. I've had some students miss the class that I'm teaching, which they're not supposed to miss, but when they do, I work with them and I actually put the onus back on them and say, what do you suggest for making this up? Look at what's on Canvas, what we did in class, and every time they get back to me. Because I'm not engaging in a power struggle. I'm saying, you had a legitimate reason. I appreciate your communication with me. How would you like to demonstrate your learning? And I interact with, the artifacts that you produce of your learning. And it has gone swimmingly every time. And then, be open about using support. I think if we can encourage them to be open with each other, the times that we've needed different kinds of, tutoring office hours, et cetera, And I mentioned this earlier, but our students right now are also starting to think about whether they're in the right major. So it's a really good time for them to reflect. It's a really good time for them to think about this, to, meet some of the faculty, go to office hours, to talk to academic advisors, and all of those different kinds of support roles that we fill here. And then I asked some student leaders. So I asked a student who I would consider kind of a rock star, has won several national fellowships and a lot of national recognition for the things that she does. One of the students who works in my office, one of our student peer leaders who actually sits in on classes and then holds some time outside of classes for other students. And what they said is that new students right now are realizing that this is a place where academics are valued, which they like because they came here because we value academics at AU. The pace is fast. There's a lot to do, but they're rising to the challenge, which is great. But there's this big issue. There's a lot of, well, everybody else is doing 18 internships and 57 clubs. No, they're not. And if they are, they're something else is giving. They're not succeeding. And so that's the thing that they unilaterally said is, you can't do everything and you shouldn't feel like you have to. If there was a club that you joined in August and then you decide that's not what you want to do, you can stop going. It's okay. It's helpful if you can, honor your commitments and let people know, just say, as I realize this isn't a club I want to be part of. That's fine. Nobody's going to hold it against them. Go to office hours. That comes up all the time. Go to office hours and have fun with your professors. Last Wednesday night, I got to hear the research from 7 of our summer scholars and artists and this amazing work that they did last year that we supported out of our research infrastructure. And every one of them said getting to know their professors is what led them to be able to have these fantastic engagements. So, being able to talk to your professors. And then one of the rock stars that I talked to said, I failed a class and it ended up being okay. And it kind of punches me in the gut because I don't want any student to ever fail a class, but she did. And it's not that you have a setback, it's what you do after that setback that really matters. And so, she went back in, she figured out what was going on, and she adapted and adjusted. And so there's a lot going on right now. I'm going to stop sharing. We know our students can be successful. And that is, one of the proudest things I think I hold working at AU is that we have great students. We have great people working with them and supporting them. I hope that helps to appease anything that you all might be worried about and hopefully give you some questions to talk to your students about. And I was talking a lot. We've got one question. So, and you can ask other questions as well. And I think Samantha and I will kind of take these, but is there any special advice for graduate school students? So I'm mostly talking kind of undergrad land right now. But grad students, yes, like it's essentially the same. Grad students, talk to your professors, it's especially if like for the students that are struggling, talking or maybe not meeting their expectations where they think they should be, talk to professors. Sometimes in grad school, especially, you're having to fill in a lot more of the gaps on your own. There's a lot more kind of independent reading. Sometimes our classes will only meet once a week for like 3 hours instead of, every 3 days like some of our other schedules do. And so that means that there's a lot of work that needs to be done between. I think grad students, especially from experience and having taught grad students, find good groups and work with other grad students, and often asynchronously works well because some grad students are also working full-time, etc. And so use your resources, use your peers in the class, use the professor. We do have academic supports available for graduate students as well. We have as many grad students who use the Writing Center as we do first-year students, actually. And that Writing Center is available for our graduate students as well. They just sometimes engage in the academics a little bit differently, and then the material is often faster and more of it. All right, other questions we have? Samantha also has a college student.
I do. And not a first year, but still all of these great points really apply all throughout. our students are becoming more independent each year as they go along, but it's still kind of good to do a check-in and see how they're doing. I remember that some questions came up in the past. Family members want to know how to support their students. How can they know how their student is doing? That always comes up as a
Hmm.
question.
Yes.
And it's not the same as when they're in high school, when
It's
we
not. It's not. And I went over this in August a bit too with the people who were in person during new student and family, well, orientation. Isn't that what we call it? New student and family orientation as well, that Sunday and Monday.
family and supporters orientation.
Yeah,
Yes, you got
exactly. Family supporters orientation. The it is different, and it took me a while to realize why people who aren't in higher ed, why it felt like a mismatch. Um, my son, from sixth grade on, we had access to his learning management system. So some people use Moodle or Canvas, or I can't even remember what all of them are, Desire to Learn, all those different things. And it's how the professors also and teachers like share materials and the grades, and you could see late work and all of that. I never monitored it. Sometimes my spouse did. Um, and I think that if you're used to seeing that in college, that gets cut off. And a lot of it is, has to do with federal privacy laws when we're working with people who are legally adults. Um, and so the students will receive academic alerts from their faculty at times. Those don't go to families and supporters. Students will, have graded work that goes back to them from the professors that does not go to families and supporters. And so that's why those kinds of questions that I'm talking about are really important. Just, and this is where it's really hard, but it's okay to struggle. It's not okay to suffer. And when you're having check-ins with your Eagle, and different people have different levels of communication. You might be texting several times a day. You might be talking on the phone, every day. You might be once a week. Like, I don't know. You figure out what works for your family. But, these are good questions to ask. And I've said this to my own son too, when he just wants to text me or call me. I said, no, I need to see your face at least once a week. And so, when your roommate's out of the room or go sit on a park bench or something, I need to see your face. And it helps me to read some of that body language and suss out the thriving versus the suffering. And all that's to say, we don't send academic information home. But the conversations that you're having with the student are important. And the vast, vast majority are really thriving right now too. But college can be hard. I was talking with a student in class last week who said that she said she felt like her brain was exploding because she goes into these classes and she's a good student, does the work, working very hard, but she's hitting what in educational worlds we call the zone of proximal development. So she's kind of here and she needs to be here, and there's a little bit of a gap. And what we look at with this zone of proximal development is what students can do with help versus what they can do alone. And she's having a little bit of trouble kind of getting up here in terms of some of the level of thought, the depth, the developing of ideas, and it will come. And this is what I talked to her about. I said the first thing is that you recognize that learning can be hard, and you said you feel like your brain is exploding. That means that your brain is literally creating new neurons. You've got new synapses creating as you're learning, because and now I'm nerding out and I'll stop. But learning is both neurochemical and it's electrical, and that's what's going on in your brain right now, and it's perfectly normal. But the fact that and then we talked some about the different supports that she has available. Like in some of those classes, there are peer leaders who are students who've taken that class in the past. They've got their cell phone numbers. Reach out to, like, they text all the time. Reach out to your PL. Go work with a tutor. Go to a supplemental instruction class. If you're having trouble developing your ideas, go work with a writing tutor. They don't want to edit your papers. They're actually not supposed to edit papers. They're supposed to help students with their ideas and expanding their ideas. And I say, got some more questions. ways to encourage them to work with an academic coach. So I think uh, some of the data that we have. So I actually don't have that in front of me right now. I think last year we had something like 658 visits to academic coaches. So our students are going to talk to academic coaches. So I think that's part of it is normalized. This is incredibly common. And the number one thing that they talk about is time management. Being able to do the things that you want to do. But then and so feel free to, talk to the student and normalize that. Working and the other things that they work on are often breaking down assignments. Like if they have a big assignment, how to do that into smaller chunks, especially for students that might have ADHD. Sometimes that can be really hard to kind of do that alone. And that's not cheating, right? That's using your resources. Work with somebody else that can help coach you through it. So I think just talk to them about it. Share back with them some of the data that our students are using these resources. That's why we have them. We don't want to have staff, sitting and twiddling their thumbs. So they really are using them. I think if you can talk some about your own successes and failures and how you learned from those, that can help. I had a conversation with my child about, when I was taking first year chemistry courses, and I realized that every test I would miss 5 to 10 points because I would make a mistake on my polyatomic ions. I would, forget like phosphate and phosphite. And I would say PO4 versus PO3. And that was something that, 5 to 10 points, that's a letter grade on an exam. And I had to realize I had to take a couple tests and, have those missed points before I realized what was going on. And so then I made a choice, and that choice was then every time before I left my room to take a test, I made myself a quiz on my polyatomic ions. And I would give myself a quiz like 30 minutes before I left my room to go take a test. And I would practice my polyatomic ions one more time so they were front of mind. And that's a very, very specific example, but that's an example of using, like having some control and knowing where you need the help. I wish we would have had academic coaches when I was in college. That didn't exist, but we do now. I hear, I just see a comment, yeah, I hate I'm not going to be at family weekend as well. That's why I wanted to be able to talk to you all ahead of time. If a parent is worried about their student, who can they contact? Samantha, do you want to touch that one first?
Absolutely. So if really our Dean of Students office, in terms of the whether it's beyond the classroom, the student really has to be the lead in going forward if they need help. The student really, I would say, encourage your student to go to their beyond what Dr. Trogden has shared, professor, advisor, the writing center, there's a Center for Well-Being. There's so many resources here, but a family member really has to get a student to move forward. So I would say that would be the key piece. A parent doesn't really contact the advisor to say, hey, can you go and check on my student? So it's very different from the high school years.
Yeah, and we do have as well the Dean of Students office. We do have a care referral process. Like I had a student who reached out to me in the second week of the term and just had a lot of intersectional issues that were going on. And I told him, I said, here's my suggestion for this, but I would really like to have somebody reach out to you. So just so you know, I'm going to submit a referral and somebody's going to reach out. And in no way does that mean that you're in trouble or anything. It's just, you indicated you're having a couple adjustment issues. And we were actually able to get him in touch with who he needed to get in touch with. And that really, really helped him because he was new to AU. He was also an international student. So there was a lot about, the city and the campus and dorm life and everything else that was really foreign to him. And so being able to have some extra help in that was very helpful. So the Dean of Students office is a great place as well, because they work on a lot of the different holistic issues. And so and I work with the Dean of Students office almost every day on something, and our academic advisors do as well. And so, I really work on the academic affairs, but the Dean of Students office also is able to touch on things like health, mental health, well-being, substance abuse issues, which do pop up. We do have an AA chapter at American University, which is important. Your students, if they need that, there are resources available. And it's the Dean of Students office is a great place to go for those as well. Okay, I think we got the questions. If other things come up, um, but I mean, big picture is they're doing well. We're going to see midterms. There's going to be some stress. I ate in the cafeteria today. I eat in the cafeteria at least once a week. I sat right next to some new students. I hear all their conversations. Every now and then they use some language that I wish could be a little more precise, to put it mildly. But they're making friends. We actually have a fall transition survey going on right now that we try to have every new student complete. And that also lets us know how they're doing overall. And then we can do reach outs to students as needed. And the data is coming back from that. So, we really do take good care of your Eagles here. And that's why we roll up, sleeves are literally rolled up. We roll up our sleeves every day and do the best that we can to, educate these individuals.
Thank you so much. I don't see any other questions coming into the chat. It's because, again, your presentation is so comprehensive and so helpful. And it's that perfect balance of like logistics and also like what a parent, a family member also needs to hear, like the encouragement that our students are in the right place, are being well taken care of, and they're very capable. And so it's the combination of all of those. I think that's why we don't have any additional questions for this evening. So I think with that, I'll say thank you so much, Dean Trogden. Thank you, Bridget, for joining us again for this wonderful presentation. Thank you all for joining us from home or wherever you may be. We have recorded the session, so we will post it probably sometime next week on the family webpage, the webinars webpage. And if you are planning to come to campus this weekend for Family Weekend, we look forward to seeing you. And if you're not to worry. We'll have more webinars coming up throughout the academic year. Of course, we'll have our bi-weekly family update newsletter so you can stay informed about lots of things going on. And there's so much more ahead. So thank you again for joining us tonight. We look forward to seeing you on screen or via email or in person, wherever it may be. And I guess once an eagle, always an eagle. Good night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.